About 12 years ago, just after I started blogging with my Total Hawaii portal, there was a story in the local media about how 6 Russians came for lunch at the famous fish restaurant Gariful on Hawaii, and their bill came to 30,000 euros, which is a fairly hefty bill for a restaurant anywhere in the world. I was quite shocked, as many people were, but the Russians actually left quite happy, because in amongst all the lobster and all the fantastic seafood, they went crazy on the wine selection there, and they were having some very rare bottles of Sauterne, the Bordeaux dessert wine. They had some incredible clarets, and they paid a pretty penny for it. They had got extremely good value in their perception. When I had lunch with the owner of Gariful, Ivan Gospodnetic, sometime later, he told me about one guest who every year used to come in his yacht and spend time and a lot of money on the island, and he particularly liked this one particular luxury champagne, pink champagne, which had a 6-litre bottle, and so Gariful would have always one bottle of this ready for him, and he knew that, and this was the only place on the coast he could get it, and so he was happy to come in, sail there, spend tens of thousands, I'm sure. For him, that was value. We did a story about a restaurant in Starigard called Nook, which is now offering coffee for €1. Amazing story, amazing value. And these 2 stories from Croatia's Premier Island, and in between you have the whole debate on prices and is Croatia expensive. A lot of people coming to Croatia this summer have said that the prices have gone up a lot. A lot of people are defending it, saying we're now in the Eurozone, that's an affected thing, there's obviously inflation. I just wanted to talk a little bit about prices, value, and the reality of where Croatia is in the tourism scene today, and what's been happening the last few years and what could happen in the future. The first thing I would say is I think prices in Croatia in general have increased. Inflation is obviously one factor. I don't think they've increased all over the country in the same way as they have in certain places. I saw my first €20 pizza on a menu at a place that 3 years ago the pizzas were 10 or 11 euros, for example. I've seen my local bar in Jelsa go from 15 kuna for a large beer 4 years ago to 30 kuna or €4 today. So same token, I've seen other places that have actually reduced prices. Croatian tourism has grown astronomically in the last decade, and a lot of this has been somewhat accidental. I'm famous for my phrase, the kingdom of accidental tourism, but it's where tourism just sort of happens. And so Croatia's benefited from a lot of things that have happened elsewhere. When you had the Arab Spring, places like Tunisia and Egypt were taken off the market, so people started coming to Croatia. When you had the whole Corona thing, people could no longer fly, and so anywhere that was a driving destination, people would come to, and Croatia really benefited from that. And Croatia's always been known as a beautiful and affordable place, but it's wanted to project itself as somewhat more of an elite destination. And this year, I think, is the first year where there are no gifts from the opposition in terms of Corona, in terms of Arab coups and so on. And this year also you have a new player on the block, and that's Albania. Albania was never really recognised as a tourist destination, but if you look at the prices in Albania, they are significantly cheaper, and now the low-cost airlines are flying into Albania for the first time. And this now is, I feel, a crossroads for Croatian tourism. We have now got up to about 20 million tourists a year, which in many ways can be seen as a success. But if you look at the environmental degradation, if you look at the quality of life in places like Dubrovnik and Split, it's not necessarily a sustainable thing for the future. And we're all looking to get into sustainable tourism, higher end tourism and so on. I think what Croatia needs to look at is its value. There are places in Croatia where it is not cheap, but the tourists go home extremely happy because they've had the value. I had an amazing week in inland Istria back in May, and I was shocked to learn that in 30 years, when there wasn't really any tourism in inland Istria, now there is a lot, and it's based on gastronomy, and it's based on nature and adventure tourism and so on like that. And the average room rate in inland Istria is €290 a night, compared to the coast where it's just €85. These are statistics from the Istrian Tourist Board. And at no point when I was travelling through inland Istria did I find people complaining about prices. They were enjoying the service, they had a really, really excellent experience with the gastronomy, and for me, that is an example of where Croatia should be going. We should be going for the higher end tourist, but providing the value. And I think what's happening this summer on the coast in Croatia is people are increasing the prices, justifying it because of inflation, the euro, not so many people are actually adding any extra value. And I think there's been a bit of a backlash. It's a bit of a wake-up call for Croatia in general, because tourism here has just happened, and we've gone from this ex-Yugoslavia, where everything was super cheap and it was known as a mass tourism destination. And now we're in the EU, we're kind of growing up as a country. We're just expecting that we can be the same prices as, say, Italy and so on. There are extremely good examples of people who are keeping their prices lower. There are extremely good examples of people who are offering excellent service. I have a friend who runs a travel forum in Split and in Dubrovnik, and she's actually saying the feedback she's getting from Dubrovnik this year is that tourists, even though the prices are higher, are actually quite happy in general, because the service has been up to standard, and so they're getting that thing that we really must focus on called value. I personally don't think that this mass beach tourism is a great strategy because of the degradation and also because of global warming. You know, I went to a Future Tense conference last year where we had a futurist tourism expert saying that by 2050 he would expect that Croatia will only have 10 million tourists a year, and the two factors limiting that will be finding workers and climate change. When you have destinations like Albania, who see as just as beautiful because it's the same, then, you know, if Croatia wants to keep that market, it's going to have to come down in price. One of the big challenges for Croatia, because there's been no strategy, is that there are now 1 million private beds in Croatia, which is astronomical. Those people are not paying hardly any tax. It's about 2% a year, and a lot of people have staked their livelihoods on that. And so now Croatia really has to decide on its pricing. It's got to decide on its value, and I think this season, officially it's another record season, just like the Stalin's 5-year plans were always successful. If you speak to people on the ground, it's a bit of a reality check. Things haven't quite gone as planned, and tourists are resisting some of these price increases. I had a really interesting time going down to the coast, looking at beer prices, and I could find cheap stuff wherever I went if I looked around. And then I came back to Zagreb, which is a city that I now live in, and I went to my local and I had a beer at €2.50 for a half litre, comparing that to Manchester, where it was £4.50 when I was there a month ago. And then you have the question of, what about the locals? Here you have a country that was always, in former Yugoslavia especially, the coast was always accessible to local people. It was cheap. You'd have, I remember in Jelsa we have this, the Beogradska Odmaralište, which is this sort of spa place outside Jelsa, and the kids of Belgrade would come for 2 weeks in January, and it became normal to have access to the coast as a local. And that now sadly has changed just because prices have gone up. So now even a beer at €2.50 is quite expensive. And now the chance for locals to come down to the coast is not what it was. And that's also an issue which needs to be addressed somehow, I feel. So an interesting season in Croatia. It's still beautiful. It's still got so much to offer. I think it's part of the growing pains of growing as a tourist destination, and it will be interesting to see what happens. If you've had a not so great experience this summer, I think next summer will probably be quite a lot different, because I think there'll be some lessons learned this summer.